Hope everybody is having a great beginning of the week. Some folks are returning back to school. Some folks are returning back to work. And of course, some folks are doing that work from home thing. As a matter of fact, I just called one of my coworkers, was trying to find out if we were going to be doing work from home again or when work was going to be starting back. Since one of the companies I work for is a testing company. And of course, the last couple of years, there's not been as much testing, that meaning the end of the year test and all of that. But we did have a couple of projects. And when I was talking to one of my friends and coworkers, they were saying that I can expect that letter any minute now that'll tell me that that work is being made available. And then more than likely, we will be working from home again. So we'll find out whether that happens or not. I do know that I just stepped outside and it's a little bit on the cool side. Yes, it's a little bit on the cool side, but you would expect that in November heading into December. But I was heading out there, dropping off some of the trash in our dumpster here at the apartment complex, and was going like, hey, it's a little bit cooler than it was yesterday, because I think it's 10 degrees cooler or something like that. But we've had some unusual weather as well, because there were some times that it was around like 70 degrees or something like that in November, and I was not expecting that. But some people don't believe that climate change is real or that it's actually taking place. But you've also got folks that are having different questions about the vaccines and things of that nature as well. So all kinds of interesting conversations going on in the world. We had two different verdicts that took place recently, one with Mr. Rittenhouse, and of course he got off. And then we had the Arbery cases where all three of the defendants were found guilty. So that is some of the things that are happening in this world and here. And of course, right here in Durham, we had a group of folks that decided that they were going to shoot up our local mall. And there was three people that were injured, and there were three other people that were actually shot. And I understand one of them is in critical conditions, and I haven't heard anything further as to how their health is going. But it was good seeing that some people jumped in and did that whole rescue notion, whether it was people that were ushering them into the stores, whether there were medical people that were there shopping, but that they actually helped the people get the care that they needed and all of that. So it's good when you see people doing what is needed to be done in these kind of trying times. When I was talking to a friend of mine out in California, they told me that they had heard that there was actually a group of folks that were going around hitting high-powered targets, such as the malls and things like that. And apparently they're very organized and very efficient. Not a word that you want to use for the criminal element, but sometimes that is what happens in the world. I am very fortunate today to have an amazing guest and somebody that I had the pleasure of knowing about through a mutual friend, as well as knowing about through their work at the National Black Theater Festival and some other things that they have done. And they have been involved in the world of acting on both film and television, and I want to say definitely stage and all of that, that being Mary Ann Alda. So she is definitely now doing some amazing work in the field of an issue that I know one of my guests here on the show has talked about as well. Dan Worthington is a lawyer. I think he's involved regularly with our Lawyers Den and all of that. And even he was bringing up, when we were talking about one of those cases, this whole issue of ageism. And as I'm getting older, I am definitely recognizing that it is a very real thing. There's no doubt it is a very real thing. There's it's too real. As a matter of fact, Marianne, I think I first learned how real it was through my mom, because my mom served on a board. Part of the reason that I got involved in media was her background in media, along with my dad, both of whom are still very much alive, still very much doing great things in our community, even in their quote unquote retired years and all of that. But I remember that she served on a major bank here in North Carolina, and they basically told her, I want to say it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when she turned 72, that she could no longer be on the board because of this whole age requirement. And I'm going like, wait a minute, Mom, you're still able to do things. You're still smart. You're still very sharp. You're still very much able to have great discussions and things of that nature. But they were like, nope, 72, you've got to be out. And I want to say that she actually got to go a little bit past, because her birthday is in May. And I think that she had to be out by that December of that year that she turned 72. So she might have gone a little bit past the year that they were talking about. But I'm just shocked that corporations do not recognize that society in general is getting older. And a lot of folks are still very much active and all of that. And by the way, I love the title of your play. And I don't know if I can say it on the air. My boss may pop in because I did send him the link as well. But it's the whole thing about what getting old is a word that is also associated with certain breeds of or certain types of dog, but you're going to wrestle it to the ground. So the people can figure it out by that title and everything. So definitely it's a great idea. And I love this idea of growing old gracefully. And I think that you have done that totally. And the fact that you can still be very vibrant and doing a lot of things, even in whatever the age, whether you're in your 70s, I'm gonna hit the big six next year, whether you're in your sixes or whatever, you can still be very vibrant and still have a very productive life. Unlike this whole notion where they used to think that you would get shipped off into the nursing home. And I was never a big fan of nursing homes.
They will still try to ship you off. You don't have to go.
Right.
But they will try to ship you off, And, so your mom was born in May. That means, is she a Taurus?
She's a Gemini.
She's a Gemini. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
She's the back end May. Okay.
Back
I'm a Taurus, but
yes.
I have a lot of Gemini friends. My friend Iona Morris is a Gemini.
Okay.
You know Iona.
I do know Iona, yes.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Go ahead. Tell folks about this whole idea of being an age advocate. Because like I said, I love your terms. You've even used the term age anarchist. And I'm going like, hey, I like this term.
Yes. I consider myself an age anarchist because I think there are certain social constructs that need to be dismantled.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm about just blowing them up. It's ridiculous. We're still living by a certain protocol that is totally outdated because people are living longer. So, middle age used to be 30, 40. Now middle age is 50, 60. Right. And I'm 73. So I guess I'm in my elderhood. I am in my elderhood. I'd like to embrace that. And that word, that word still,
right.
It's like, that's kind of a funky word. It's like, well, I can still do that. I can still do that. I can do it. I can't still do it. I can do it. Right. You know what I mean? We talk about the things that we think that we need to give up as we get older. Right. And, don't stop living before it's time to stop living, before you stop living. Right. When it's over, it's over. But until then, party on.
No, I agree. I think that you should party on, and I definitely think that you need to have that vibrant life and everything. I know that even with women that I've talked to, some of them have said that when they went through that period that you ladies go through, that whole menopause thing, that they would sometimes discover their energy, their sexuality, and then sometimes they would be like, hey, after it's done, then I can do what I feel like. So there are some people that have rediscovered their sexuality, is what some of my friends that are pushing around 60 or 70 have told me, whereas some of the ones that are in their 50s and 40s and dealing with the hot flashes, they're going like, no, I don't want you to touch me.
Well, and then also you don't have to worry about getting pregnant anymore after you get, after you go through menopause. But that is not to say that, still no glove, no love.
Right.
Because you can still contract, STDs and whatnot. You still have to be safe. You still have to be cautious. You still have to be careful. But yeah, you don't have to worry about, getting knocked up anymore, right. which is a good thing, because, I have friends who had children later in life. Mm-hmm. And I always say, 40 with a toddler is cute, but in your 50s with a teenager, that's not pretty, because menopause and puberty are not a good match. But, but it happens when it happens. So I think there's no one prescribed way of living. It's like, this happens by a certain age, and this happens by a certain age, and this happens by a certain age. People do everything whenever they feel compelled to do it. I mean, we live life kind of like a smorgasbord. You do a little of this, a little of that, a little of this, a little of that. And also you do it according to, how you feel. Like you
Mhm,
just said, some women are feeling more sexual later on
mhm,
in their 60s than they were in their 50s when they're going through menopause. A lot of women get that surge too of energy,
mhm,
where they want to do more, they want to, and men too as well.
mhm.
They look at the second or third act and they think, well, what can I do now? And they're starting new careers. A lot
Right.
of entrepreneurship among baby boomers
Yeah.
that are leaving their jobs in corporate America, retiring, and sometimes even leaving early, and starting whole new careers. A lot of people are doing that.
Yeah. A lot
I,
of people
I
do.
I'm trying to stick with my old one, as
Hey,
an actor. They try to
and
bounce me out, but I'm still doing it
no,
because I
you're
love
still
it.
doing it. You're doing amazing at it, and you're still doing some great roles. And you definitely had some of that history and everything. But you mentioned that people and the way that they're doing things differently. Because I've had some friends of mine that have even talked about family values, and I know that that's a catchphrase that some people use and everything. But they were talking about how when more women went into the workforce, then a lot of people did put off having children or having the family until later in life because they had more opportunities for careers. And I was just wondering your thoughts about that because I know that that's become a conversation where some people are like, but maybe that's not what we wanted when we had the whole Leave It to Beaver kind of like attitude and things of that nature. Of course, there was a lot of other things with Leave It to Beaver that I was not a big fan of, including the way they treated race as well.
Well, women are more than just incubators. Some
Right.
women choose not to have children at all, and that's fine as well. I think I would say I think the LGBTQ community has
Mm-hmm.
done a lot for just busting the norms wide open. You know, the fact that we have able to embrace, well, accept, not
Mm-hmm.
everyone has embraced it, but accept gay marriage, and the trans community. I think that these groups have really helped to open the doors and open people's minds to make a lot more things acceptable. And maybe people who were afraid to try something different look to them and say, well, if they're brave enough to live their truth, then let me live mine. And I think that we are becoming more of a less a homogenous world. There's no one size fits all.
Right.
Do your own thing as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, and it's nobody else's business. We
Yep.
used to live our lives, with a lot of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it say in the Bible? Judge not, lest ye be judged.
Right.
I think it's really important to live by that. Don't turn up your nose at the way somebody chooses to live their life just because that's not the way you would do it.
Yeah.
And you do you. And and especially as we get older, not everybody ages in the same way. Some people want to, when they retire, that's it. They don't want to do anything else. They want to
Yeah.
read, they want to fish, they want to just chill. Other people want to keep going and do other things, other
Right.
activities. And so it really is, it's kind of like the best of times, the worst of times. I would say the best of times because things are kind of busting wide open. It's the worst of times because people are thrown off a little off balance because
Mhm.
they kind of don't know where they are, where they fit in. Everything is up for grabs. We don't quite know how it's all going to settle. Will we still have a democracy next week? Um, these things are really important, but I do believe that, man means for your ill and God means for your good.
Okay.
Some things needed to be revealed that maybe we didn't want to take a look at, but we're taking a
Mhm.
look at them now. But only when you have an awareness of what's going on and don't try to sweep it under the rug, then you can heal it. Race, all the isms, racism, sexism, ableism, all
Mhm.
those isms are front and center now, and we're discussing them. And there's a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth, a lot of yelling
Right.
sometimes, but But I think when it all settles down, it'll be better for everyone. I'm that's what I'm praying for.
I know that's right. I think that you consider, if I remember reading some of the bios, feminists and things of that nature. What are your thoughts when you hear the conversation about being an African American and a feminist? Because we know that sometimes it was two issues, and sometimes we were trying to be on the side of both women's rights and African American rights if you were a woman in that space. So I was wondering your thoughts as to how you even dealt with that, or if you even considered yourself a feminist in that regards.
Um, I am an activist.
Okay.
Well, whether it's women's rights, whether it's civil rights for people of color, or for older people.
Mhm.
I'm an age, I am just an activist. I'm about making change, positive change, so that it benefits everyone.
Right.
There should not be, we live in an era where there has been a certain amount of privilege.
Hmm.
Men have had privilege, um, white people have had privilege, um, and cisgender straight people have had privilege that has been denied other groups, and other groups are saying, oh hell no. Can I say that? I did already, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. Perfectly fine.
Okay. Oh heck, darn it, no. Things need to change, and the thing about it is that things don't change without a certain amount of discomfort.
Right.
People who've had privileges aren't that crazy about losing some of them, or what they feel is a loss. I always say this, that when you are sharing, it's not like you're getting a smaller piece of the pie. God knows how to bake more pies. Loaves and fishes, baby, loaves and fishes. God can bake more pies. You're not losing anything by when other people get their fair share. Nobody's taking anything away from you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And even coming back to ageism, I know that a lot of times it seems like corporate America, Madison's Avenue, and all of that, that they are marketing still to our youth population. But it is my understanding that the majority of the buyers are actually people that are over 50. So is it just me, or is Madison Avenue and those people in Hollywood, and I know you've worked in Hollywood and the television industry, missing the boat to some degree? Because I'm sitting there and when I watch the ad, it's like a lot of people and a lot of ads that seem to be geared toward those that are 40 and under. And I'm thinking that maybe Madison Avenue and some of the other commercial entities are totally missing the boat.
Well, you know what? I think it's changing. Although maybe the TV that I watch skews towards towards an older audience,
Right.
so maybe they're specifically airing ads that would appeal to me, or my age generation. I think it's changing. Oops,
Ooh,
oops,
telephone.
that's my phone. Oh, sorry, I didn't turn my phone off. I'm going to turn it off right now.
All right, that's okay.
Oops. Okay. You can. Well, you hear my bad to the bone is my my ring.
And
Um,
that's a good one. And by the
da
way,
da 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 da.
Dr.
Huh?
Keisha Basimore said, yes, ma'am. She's 51 and vibrant and useful as ever. So she was saying that she's useful as ever, even at the age of 51.
See, there you go. They're using that qualifier again. Even at the age at 51, like it's some big surprise.
Right.
No, it isn't. She is vibrant at 51. Period. Okay.
Okay.
Take those qualifiers out. See, this is the thing. We have to be very careful of how we language things.
Right.
Um, I trained as a hypnotherapist, and after I turned 50 and Hollywood stopped calling, I trained as a hypnotherapist, and am well versed in neurolinguistic programming.
Hmm.
This narrative, the stories that we tell ourselves, the words that we use to describe ourselves, sink into our subconscious mind, and they form our belief systems. And we do this unconsciously, and we're not even aware of what we take in, the negative images and stuff like that. And then we wonder why we feel uh, that old, or that we should age in a certain way. It's because of the world that we live in. So I'm uh, very careful about the way I language,
Hmm.
um, how I feel about myself, or how I describe myself. It's not like, oh, I can still do this. No, I can do this. It's not I can still. I'm not trying to compare myself now to my self 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. Um what Marianne did 30 years ago, maybe Marianne's not doing now, but maybe Marianne doesn't have any interest in doing that. We change, we grow. We I would say we mature, but not everyone does. Some people just get older. I don't think they get any more mature. And some younger people are very mature. And when I use the word mature, I use that word to describe people who have an awareness and a consciousness. I don't think of it as maturity as a behavior
Mhm.
so much as I do think of maturity as a uh, an awareness and um, consciousness.
Gotcha. Do you think that Hollywood has gotten any better in its portrayal of folks of a different age? And by the way, Dr. Bazemore also was saying, it is, my grandma was so different at this age. I'm proud of the fact that I'm 51 and vibrant. So she was saying that she's proud of
Okay.
the fact that she's 51 and vibrant. But do you think, because like I said, you were a trailblazer in that industry, doing work on soap operas and including some soap operas that are well known, having worked with some great stars like Clifford and definitely Sherman Hemsley and a number of others. So you were definitely a trailblazer at the time that you were out. But then you just said that at a certain age, Hollywood stopped calling. So is Hollywood gotten any better at calling folks at a different age, and particularly with society aging and the fact that many of the stories that we need to tell are stories of people that are in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s?
Well, soap operas came about basically to sell soap.
Right.
They sponsored, Tide and whatever different soaps in there. So they created a story that the soap manufacturers could advertise on, and that's there we have the name soap operas. Um, and that hasn't changed. Uh, Harrison Ford said that in an article I read in the LA Times about 30 years ago. Um, he said, I have no illusions about the role I serve in this industry. I am simply a cog that helps to turn the wheels of commerce. Well,
Mm-hmm.
soap operas turn a particular wheel of commerce. And I do believe the stories will change because when you don't tell stories about that include vibrant, vital older people in them, we don't watch them. And if you want to get into my pocketbook, then you have to lure me with a story that I want to see.
Right.
So, and Hollywood has not built enough cogs to turn that particular wheel, especially when it comes to women, especially when it comes to especially women of color. So, I I think it's changing. It's going to have to change, not out of a sense of social consciousness, but of plain old economics. It's uh, women, according to a Federal Reserve 2017 Federal Reserve Survey on consumer finances, women over the age of 50 own 75% of the wealth in this country. And so when there is a television show or a film that doesn't have a nuanced, layered, non-stereotypical female character of in a leading role, you're leaving money on the table. So Hollywood, but I think Hollywood is catching up to it now. First of all, I think the whole pro-age activism
Mm-hmm.
is kind of replicating the civil rights movement and the feminist movement. Um, I think as the millennials now, I mean, not the millennials, I'm sorry, Gen X. Gen X is pushing into their 50s. Uh, Baby boomers are now in their 60s and 70s, and Gen X is easing on into their 50s, and they can't look backwards. They're not going to go backwards. The road in front of them, it's up to the baby boomers to make it look like it's going to be fun or positive or something to look forward to. You want to look forward to getting older. What you don't look forward to is dying. There's only two options: you get old or you die young. Pick
Right.
one and make it. And which one of those two is more attractive? And if you're going to live, 30, 40 years beyond 50, if you up to 50 is 50 years. Not between 50 and 90 is 40 years. That's still half a lifespan. You got to spend the rest, a whole half of your life just twiddling your thumbs, going humming, 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 humming. No, that's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous.
And my brother has done some work on with at-risk youth, and I'm not a big fan of that term, but I know that you've also worked with youth as well. So you are definitely a supporter of, the folks that are in the 60s, 70s, 80s age range getting their respect. But it also sounds like you're a big fan of those on the opposite spectrum getting their just dues as well. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing in that arena as well.
Oh, well, yeah. Ageism just doesn't affect older people; it affects younger people too. Uh, and I just hate discrimination. I hate to use the word hate, but I am. um, we can do better. We can be better. Um, we need to look out for each other. The idea that having a safety net like adequate health care and education, that we consider that um, a privilege, or that we consider that extra. Education is an extra. If you think education is going to cost you a lot of money, think of what stupid is going to cost you. Stupid is going to cost you a lot more. Um, uh, I was raised to be an activist. My parents, my mother was a Democrat, my father was a Republican. So there was always, conversations around the dinner table. Um, Nobody punched anybody out. It was all very civil, heated, but civil. So I have always understood different points of view. And no, I take that back, because there's some stuff that's going on right now. I don't understand. I don't understand it. But like, why you wouldn't want to get vaccinated? I have a problem with that. Um, but and some of the mean spiritedness there, I think, that's we're finding a lot of that too. We become a more polarized nation, and I think we need to be able to respect each other's differences. You know, and until we get to that point, we're always going to have problems. But hopefully, you know, God works in mysterious ways. If we don't get it together, God will get it together for us. And I don't want to see what God's going to do. It's not going to be pretty.
I hear
Sometimes I
you.
say it's Sodom and Gomorrah time. But anyway.
Well, I'm going to actually bring in, and I would love to hear your thoughts about having worked with some of these amazing celebrities that you did work with. Because, like I said, you worked opposite Red Fox. You definitely worked along Della Reese, and I definitely remember Della Reese. And there were a number of others, including your role on Designing Woman, and of course, working with O.J. Simpson. So you've had the pleasure of working with some amazing elite there in Hollywood of all types and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that work, and I'm sure that Shaquille, who's also a fan of unity and things of that nature. He sometimes gets on my case
Uh,
about that. But Shaquille is coming at us from down under. So he's actually down there in Australia and all of that. But he is a regular on our show and things of that nature. I don't know if you ever made it to Australia, Miss Marianne.
well, it's funny because I just this morning, right before I came on here, which is why my hair is kind of flat because I had my Dr. Ginger wig on. I am doing an excerpt from my show for the Silver Sirens, redefining aging, that takes place at Sydney this Saturday. And just to make sure that they're going to bring me in by Zoom, but just to make sure, in case there's a technical difficulty, I videoed my segment this morning and sent them the link so they'll take a look at it. I'm going to be doing my character of Dr. Ginger, the adult sex ed evangelist and mojo motivator. So Dr. Ginger is sharing her wisdom with the women. She's funny. She's a little naughty, but funny. And we talk about all kinds of things. So it's just a little 10-minute segment. But yes, I'm going to be in Australia virtually this Saturday. And tickets are available. I hadn't planned on plugging this, but I guess I should. Tickets are available online at silversirens.com. And it's going to be both a live and a virtual event. So if you are in Australia and you'd like to go, please, by all means, you can still get tickets. And if you can't, then there are virtual tickets that are available as well. And there's a lineup of speakers that is just phenomenal. So I'm part of the entertainment, but there's a lineup of fabulous women speakers. And it's about redefining aging. So.
And what I'm sure Shaquille may have some thoughts because we were talking earlier backstage about his mom and his grandma and definitely some of the things that are going on
backstage,
in his life.
Off-air conversation, Mark.
But I'm just saying, but you are proud of your parents and all of that. So I was not going to get into any of the details of the conversation and things along those lines. But definitely, what are some of your thoughts as one that is a younger person about this whole notion of ageism? Because like I said, Marianne is definitely a proponent, as you've heard, of unity, but she also feels that there are some unfairnesses that exist due to age and other things. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, Shaquille.
Well, I think as far as the workforce is concerned, hello, Marianne. I'm Shaquille. I actually only know you from Sunset Beach, so I'm glad that you look much better now than you do on the show.
That's hilarious. Yes, I had Martin syndrome. Was it Soap Opera Weekly said that was the best bad storyline of 1998. I wore that as a badge of honor.
But look, I think it's an interesting dynamic when you work with older people, as I often do. People, when I've had personal assistants or people like that, people are generally expecting them to get the sort of bubbly 18-year-old to be my PA. Hell no. I'm generally going to want somebody who's a bit older. One, because they've got enough life experience; they're not going to put up with my crap. And if I'm their boss, I need someone who's not going to put up with my crap. If I've got an appointment that I must attend, I need someone that's going to be like, Shaquille, you need to go and attend this. And somebody who's younger may not be, as comfortable doing that. But look, even past retirement, I don't think that life should be over. Those should be, like childhood should be, some of the most magical times of your life. You're carefree, you don't to worry about too many things. When you get older, obviously I haven't been there yet, but when you get older, your kids are self-sufficient, they move out of home, you've got a lot more freedom, you've normally got a bit more financial security. Life shouldn't end at that point. So I think it's important, and it's a good thing for older people to not feel like they're just dead. You've worked 40 years, you retire, and you sit in front of the TV and just watch, soaps. As good as they might be, Marianne.
There are no more soaps. There's only 4 left.
Well, Days of Our Lives are still running, right?
Days of Our Lives. I tell you what they are: Days of Our Lives, General Hospital, Bold and the Beautiful, and The Young and the Restless. Those 4.
Those 4, which have been around since I was a kid. But you need people to have a life out there, and I think the more activities that we can have that include older people, the better. When I was a child, I lived in a very semi-rural part of Western Australia, and there was nursing homes. There was one nursing home and an older couple that lived basically at the end of my street. It was a sort of 5-6 minute walk, and I used to go and visit them on the weekends and go and visit them during school holidays, and I'd learn how to play cards and would play Monopoly and Scrabble and all these different things. And I'd learn a lot from older people. So I think that's important that we recognise that all of us have a contribution to make, and we should never think that somebody's too old or too young for us to be able to have a conversation with and learn something and connect with other people.
Marianne, I've got to get back to something. Your character, Ginger, and everything. What kind of advice is she giving to these women that is going to be really? I think it's going to be wild and kind of carefree because you're kind of that way as well. So, what kind of advice is she giving to folks on their social and their dating life? If we even want to go further than that.
Well, one of the things I do talk about is the fact that in self discovery, I'll do a little bit from I say I have been often bludgeoned by the moniker high maintenance chick and felt compelled to apologize, but for what I was never quite sure of. Then I go on and on and on, and I end it with advice if somebody tries to drop a dime on them because of their standards. So, men, listen to this. Remember, because this is advice for you. You cannot treat a thoroughbred the same way you treat a plow horse and expect to maintain the same high quality thoroughbred performance levels.
Good point.
Does that go the other way around as well?
Well, everyone who wants a plow horse. Everybody wants a thoroughbred because, and it's a little risque, because you also get a better ride. Hello. I'm just saying.
Makes sense. You get a better ride there.
You bet. A plow horse, really? Okay.
No, we don't want that.
No. You know what happens
If you
to plow
make it
horses?
down, if you make it down to Australia, I will take you to the stables and let you see some of my thoroughbred horses that I own.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping after Saturday, once I see a 10-minute excerpt, I'm hoping someone will want to bring me to Australia so I can do my show. My show, by the way, Getting Old is a B, but I'm going to wrestle that B to the ground. I'm just going to use the letter of the word, not the whole word. Broke a 30-year box office record at the National Black Theater Festival in 2019. And then it got picked up, and I did it at the Billie Holiday Theater in New York in February 2020. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. But what I discovered, because most of the audience, you've been there, Mark, you know what the festival is like. A lot of the audience is professional, middle-aged and older Black people. That's the majority of the audience. And I think, and the show sold out like weeks before the event. And I think just the title alone, of course, they also know me because I've brought several shows down there. I think the title alone intrigued them because everyone has a vested interest in seeing their stories be told.
Right.
And to see, how situations that they might have in their lives, to see how somebody else dealt with them, how they got played out. And well, like one of the things I talk about, a lot of my show is autobiographical. I take some of my life experiences and I give them to Dr. Ginger. And then she takes a creative license with them. But one of the things I talk about, for example, is the fact that I am a cancer survivor. Mm-hmm. I had uterine cancer, and any kind of gynecological cancer for women you're not only concerned about your health, but you're concerned about your femininity and your sexuality. Mm-hmm. And so I said, that I do not consider myself any less of a woman without a uterus. In fact, I think of my hysterectomy as an internal Brazilian. If you're going to landscape the runway, why not declutter the terminal? I'm still good for happy landings. And so, when you take a hard truth and you wrap it in comedy, it's a lot more palatable. And I had so many women who were cancer survivors or who were going through things who would come up to me. I could talk about divorce. I talk about becoming an empty nester. And they would come up to me, and some with tears in their eyes. This one woman came up to me and she said, where were you in my house? Because she thought I was telling her story. She said, where were you at? You hiding out in the closet somewhere? And I said, well, no. But she said, you told my story. And I think the more specific and authentic a person is in telling their story, the more universal it is, because people will project their own experiences onto it. And that is, I mean, I consider my acting now, especially in on stage, as my ministry.
Mm.
Um, because it enlightens and uplifts people. And as an actor, that's really what I want to do. I didn't become an actor. I think of myself as a storyteller more than an
Mhm.
actor. I didn't become an actor to like, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's like, how can I share information so that you can open up your mind a little bit, so that you can see things from a different perspective? That's really the juice of why I do what it is that I do, to open people's minds and open people's hearts, and get them to either feel better about themselves and or feel better about their fellow man or woman.
Shaquille has brought up on some of our other shows this whole notion of cancel culture, and he's actually admitted, and I was even agree with him that it has happened on both the left and the right. Do you ever worry as a performer about cancel culture and the fact that maybe sometimes there may be people that are afraid of the stories that you are telling and afraid of even allowing some of those messages to go out?
You know, if I tried to make everybody like me, I couldn't have a career. I couldn't be an artist. Um, there are people who respond to me. There are people who won't. I think more do than don't, personally. But some people can't be reached, and I don't try to water down my material to reach everyone. I try to be as upfront and honest as I possibly can. But I think I'm also tactful and diplomatic in that way. As for cancel culture, I think if you want to change anybody's mind about anything, you have to be open to their point of view, and you have to listen, and to listen to why they're where they're coming from and how they got that particular point of view. Um, but on both sides, we've kind of stopped listening. You can't just say you. Nobody's going to listen to that anymore. You just stop listening. And sometimes when somebody's not listening, you need to walk away, and you need to. I had a therapist once who said, never try to have a conversation with a crazy person. When she said crazy, she meant emotionally flooded.
Right.
Um, because she said, just be silent and let them talk. Don't try to debate them, because at the end of that time, the only words left hanging in the air will be theirs, and they'll have to listen to them.
I think my thing with council culture is, comedy is a really great way of being able to bridge the differences that people sometimes feel that there is between us. And oftentimes it's about making fun of the obvious stereotypes. And if you have a look at any comedy, comedies are generally tragedies as well, right? So you see them, and you can relate to sometimes even the more prejudiced characters, or a character that's being prejudiced against, but you end up liking that character in the end. And most comedies culminate in the characters seeing each other and having that commonality. And if we can't make fun of each other, and I don't mean making fun in a nasty way, but if we can't make fun of each other at all, then we're going to lose the ability to be able to connect with people. And I think that's a real issue with council culture is, as you said, Marianne, you're not trying to make everybody like you as a performer. You're not trying to do that. But a lot of people today feel as though they have to make sure that they're not going to offend anybody. They're not going to upset anybody. They're never going to have somebody dislike them. And especially in the world today that young people live in, TikTok, Instagram, etc., because they're so worried that people are going to, be upset with them, they end up saying very politically correct things. They try to sanitize what they're doing. And by doing that, they lose their personality and they lose them. You've got to put your own stamp on anything. If you're an actor, you don't just quite follow the script. You always put your own stamp on every character that you play. And I think that's being lost a little bit today.
I would agree with you to a certain extent. I think what's happened, like, for example, Carol O'Connor's character, Archie Bunker. He's just what you described. He was totally obstinate, judgmental, but you didn't believe the things that he said, but you knew that he had a good heart. Even the way he talked to Edith, I mean, the way he talked to his son-in-law, I mean, he could be a real, okay, I can't use the word, but use a word of your choice that you might use to describe him. Pick one, your favorite. But also, he had a sense of humanity. He was vulnerable. I think if you cannot have comedy without vulnerability, if you just lambast somebody and want to beat him over the head, ha ha ha, that's not funny. So a lot of what passes for comedy is just plain old insult. They have insult humor. Sometimes it's just a plain old insult, and that's not funny. You got to know why you're saying it, and it has to be for a reason, especially if you're saying something that's a little could be taken.
I think if you're going to say something that's risque, and I think part of the thing that I dislike more about modern comedy versus previous shows is that I think that jokes should stand on their own merit without a laughing track. And when you start seeing those laughing tracks and you hear like an insult and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to laugh right now, but it wasn't that good. And again, I think that's sort of symptomatic of the idea that, everybody has to act as though we don't want anyone to dislike us. And I don't think we should do that, especially when you're trying to oftentimes we're making fun of characters who we think are too old-fashioned or they have prejudiced views. We make fun of those characters in order to give them some humanity, because that way you can relate to that person's fears. You can relate to that person trying to make it in the world and just not quite getting it correct and that sort of stuff. You begin to feel for that character. And that's what it's all about, really, with all sorts of movies, TV shows, theatre shows. You've always got to have characters that develop, that you fall in love with those characters, or that even if you don't like the character, but you actually resonate with the character and the character speaks to you in some way. Without having that, I think the audience is sort of a bit lost.
Marianne, I had an interesting conversation. It actually comes back to what Shaquille is saying to some degree with my younger brother during the Thanksgiving time and everything. And we were talking about improv, actually, because he was actually feeling that improv is a misnamed entity in the field of comedy, because when he thinks of improv, he thinks of Miles Davis, and he actually felt that a lot of the improv that we see in improv, like Whose Line Is It Anyway, or a number of the other ones, he's actually thinking that it's rehearsed. I've actually practiced on some improv, so I know it's not always rehearsed, but he was feeling that it was overly rehearsed, and therefore it didn't have the same kind of improv as, say, jazz improvisation, because they might go up on any kind of jazz riff. So he wasn't seeing it in the same kind of line. So what would your answer be to those folks that maybe don't necessarily even understand the nuances of comedy, for lack of a better term?
Of improv specifically. Improv is, okay, music has structure. It has notes. Right. It has structure.
Right.
Good improv has structure. Within that structure, you can go here, you can go there, you can create a narrative, but it has a certain amount of structure. I actually trained with the Proposition, which is the improv group that came out of Boston that's launched. Jane Curtin, Josh Mustel, Monteith, and Rand. And we were trained with structure. Rollo May has a book, The Courage to Create. You don't have improv without structure. What you have is chaos.
Mhm.
You have to know where you're going, and there has to be a story arc. A lot of what passes, because I'm in Chicago now, and it's like the improv capital of the world. A lot of what I see passing for improv is just people being silly and just doing stuff without knowing the structure. And unless there's a structure, you don't get a payoff. The audience needs a payoff. Um, Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, I definitely agree. What is your feelings about the state of comedy right now? Just comedy in general. Do you feel that it is in a positive direction, or would you like to see it go in a better direction in the 21st century?
I'd like to see more of me in it. Uh,
Agreed.
I happen to love comedy. Some of my favorite shows were like, the Cosby Show, um, Murphy Brown Designing Women, and
Where'd you win that?
Frasier, huh?
Where'd you win that?
Yes, I was, but that's not why. I just happen to love those women. I would love to see a show with women like that today. I mean, design or the Golden Girls, something with where women were ballsy and opinionated and not necessarily likable, but you like them anyway. Um, I think comedy is finding its way. I think we go, it is what it's going to be. I think in the early 70s, I mean, early 70s, my God, the early like 2000s, what we saw was a lot of, I don't call it sitcom, I call it sketchcom.
Mhm.
You know, in the best sitcoms that you see, you those characters exist at least in your imagination during the week, and then you just get a chance to peek in on them like on Tuesday or Thursday nights to see what they're doing. In the 2000s, we saw a lot of family sitcoms that those families only existed on a soundstage. They did not exist in real life, and you could watch them, you could take them or leave them. If I don't have a personal investment
Mhm.
in the characters, if I don't really care about what's going to happen to them, I'm not going to watch. I might tune in, but I'm not going to be a loyal viewer. And I and
I think
I miss the sitcoms where you just fell in love with those characters and you wanted to know what was going to happen to them. And that's the
I
kind of
think when
comedy I
you
want to do.
I think when you mentioned the Golden Girls, that's a really interesting an interesting show because there was a dynamic in that show where you got four older women trying to relate to the world. That's the next generation is running. I think this generation we haven't really had that, and of course, think of how much technology has changed since you guys were kids. Since I was a child, I grew up with records, and then records became CDs, and now I speak to kids, and they're like, "What's a CD?"
Oh no, there was an 8-track before there was a CD. You missed it. You missed one.
I might have missed that bit, but like you had VHS cassettes, and you had those beta cassettes, those little ones, and like I try and talk to people, not much younger than me, 10 or 15 years younger than me, and talk about how you'd have your favorite. For me, growing up in the '80s, had my favorite meatloaf tape, or my mum used to love ABBA, and they'd have the tape in the radio, and it would get all muddled up, and you have to get the pen out and try and pull the tape out. There isn't really a show for people who are, now a little bit older, like there was before, which bridges the gap of the generations. And, there's been a gigantic leap in technology from, people who are growing up today to what it was even 30 years ago, let alone 50 or 60 years ago. And I think that there's room in the market for a show like that, but it hasn't happened yet. I'd love to see something like that happening where you talk to a few different generations, which is what a lot of those sitcoms did back in the day.
And by the way, shameless plug, I'm on Clubhouse on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with a young woman, Kara Masteller. I'm 73. She's 27. I'm a boomer. She's a zillennial, which is not quite Generation Z, not quite millennial. She's right in the middle. She's a zillennial. And we have an intergenerational conversation about aging and ageism. Has worked in gerontology and aging policies and stuff like that. And she's very knowledgeable. And we just have kind of a fun conversation, and people come in and we talk about the state of the world. We pick a different topic every week. But who would have thought, and thank you, Clubhouse, in another world, we probably would never have gotten together. But we started running this room like last March, and we're still going strong. And we have, and we become friends. Totally different generations, but there is a genuine friendship there. And you're right. We need to see more generations interacting, and not just being the older people being the butt of the joke, or older people, yelling at the younger people to get off their lawn. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
But don't ruin it. Some of us young people think, I can't wait till I'm older and I can yell at young kids to get off my lawn.
Yeah, Shaquille's waiting for that. Shaquille's waiting for that day. He wants to be like the character from Dennis the Menace. He wants to be over there just yelling constantly.
I want to be a grumpy old man when I'm older. Absolutely.
You can be grumpy. You can be grumpy now, Shaquille.
I'm still single, Marianne. So until I'm no longer single, I'm going to be jovial. But as soon as I'm not single anymore, I'll be grumpy.
Oh no, you don't want to do that to your wife and kids. You're going to be grumpy to everybody else.
He's going to be grumpy. Marianne, I'd love to know a little bit about your thoughts around, because it's one of the definitely Shaquille mentioned the soap opera, but you were also, and you have alluded to it a couple of times, part of Designing Women, and that character that you played was definitely the girlfriend from hell. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that particular character and everything.
He was, which I loved playing that character. It was
is it Lita something? Lita
Ford.
Lita Ford, that's right. Lita
Ford, who was also a rock star. She's a just white female rock musician. I don't know who came up with that name, but yes, Pam Norris, because I think Pam Norris wrote that episode. It was 13 pages of dialogue in a 40-page script. It was a lot. It was my first, because I recurred on that show, but my first time out. And Dixie Carter, I think we haven't talked about The Edge of Night. I was one of the first African-American daytime soap opera heroines. I played Dee Dee Bannister on Edge of Night. Dixie Carter had also been on Edge of Night, not at the same time. She had been on earlier. And she was so lovely and gracious. The first couple of scenes, I had one scene where I'm facing the other four women, and they're just glaring at me because I had a lot of dialogue, and they're looking at me like, is she going to get through it? Is she going to get through it? And I did, and I earned their respect. And Dixie came up to me and she said, I just want you to know that we've been together for so long that sometimes we've kind of lost our manners, but you're doing a wonderful job. And I thought that was so sweet of her. And Meshach Taylor, who I played his girlfriend, I also worked with him in a movie called Class Act. Uh-huh. We played the rapper Kid's parents. And his wife, Bianca Ferguson Taylor, used to be on General Hospital. So I knew her from back in the day when we were on soaps together in the 80s. And we would have, the ABC soaps would have the little events together. But I ran into her once at a commercial audition, and she said to me, girl, you in bed with my husband more than I am. She was kidding, but the fact that we had worked together so much, and God bless him, God rest his soul. He was a wonderful actor. Another one gone too soon, and he was just a delightful human being as well as a wonderful actor.
What were some of the important lessons you learned from some of the actors and actresses that you worked with, and what were some of those that still resonate with you now?
Okay. What I learned from Red Fox, he said, I'll tell you a funny Red Fox story. We were, the first time I met him, I had already been cast, but we had not been put together as a family, the whole cast. We were cast separately. And the first time I met him was at CBS at a photo shoot for that we're going to promote the show. And I brought some of my was asked to bring in some of my wardrobe that I would be thought would be right for the character. And so we're all lined up as a family. And Red looks at me and he said, "What the hell are you wearing?" He said, "You know, can't we get her something else to wear?" And I said, "Well, Red, this is my dress." And he said, "Well, then we need to take up a collection and buy you some clothes." And so and so he said, because and it was a Laura Ashley kind of baggy, flowy dress that they were wearing at the time. He said, "No, no, 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 no." He said, "No, baby, this is show business. You got to show them something." He said, "Get some pins," and he made them get some pins and pin it up so you could. He said, "You got a nice shape. You got a." So then we were ready. He said, "No, that," and then he looked at my chest and he said, "Now, can't we get her some socks or something?" And they got me they socks, to sort of build me up out. That would not happen in the Me Too movement. But the point that he was making was that you are always being judged. You're always selling. So you always have to be aware of the way you present yourself and the appearance, that you make. You always need to know what kind of commodity you are, because in show business, you are a commodity. And to make sure it's packaged correctly. And he see that was it. This is show business. You got to show them something. It's about marketing. And I think of myself in this industry as a product. If I do my work in promoting the product correctly, that's my real job, because the acting I would do for no money at all. If I do my work, then I get to do the thing that I love to do. That's that's how it works.
Do you think enough people actually, and this comes back to something that Shaquille, who's involved in the business world, knows about as well. Do you think enough people in the acting field or in the arts in general know enough about what you've just said several times, which is that it is a business, and that they get too caught up in the show and don't know enough about the business? Because I know sometimes I'm amazed at musician friends of mine that don't have business plans, don't have pitch decks, don't have a number of other things. So I was wondering, do you think that artists in general know enough about business?
Are you asking me or Shaquille?
I'm asking you, and then I'd love to hear
Oh,
from
me.
Shaquille.
Oh, okay. Um, the smart ones do. The smart ones do. I think that, okay, I'll use myself as an example. When I had a great career for 30, 35 years, and then I hit my mid 50s, and they thought, and the a casting director stopped calling me. I think one of the reasons was because in a lot of my career, I was, I was attached to a man in some way. I was the wife, I was the girlfriend, I was the other woman, but there was usually, I was, and, or I was the pretty girl. It's like, what do you do to a pretty girl when she gets old, and she's not pretty anymore? So my agent suggested that I gain 50 pounds so I could do more character work. I thought, no, 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 no. And a lot of the scripts that I get now for a woman my age, she's one of three things, one of three C's. She's a curmudgeon, she's crippled, or she's crazy. That is ridiculous. So I made a conscious effort. Um, you know, I don't do old. It's just like I don't do black. I am black. For me to try to play some stereotype of black is redundant. So I don't play some sort of stereotype of old, which means that for a good period of time, I did not work a lot in television. But I know that there's an audience and a market. So I continued to work on stage, doing stand up or doing theater. So the lane that I've carved out for myself might be narrow, but it's not very well, it's not heavily populated, you know? I I play the same kind of characters that I've always played, except now that she's older. There's a, it's like I say, you know, I was vain in my 20s. I'm not going to stop being vain at 73. And I think there are a lot of women who are like me. We talked early on, you started about being vibrant and vital and alive. That's the kind of character I play with energy, because I have energy. For me to try to play something other than that, it's going to look like first of all, I don't want to do it. And especially in film and television, people get cast pretty much for what they are. There is an innate quality that is carried through in every character that they play. You find, like, Tom Hanks is always going to be likable, even if he's playing a villain. You like that guy. There's a certain innate quality. So for me to play, and I have a lot of energy just in life, for me to try to play like I didn't have it is not going to work. But I do believe that because Hollywood has not built enough cogs in this particular arena, I think I will be working again on television, because there is a need for what I represent, because it's not being represented. And I know there's an audience there because they come to my shows and they tell me that's what they want to see. Did I answer your question?
You did. I love to hear Shakil's thoughts as well. I love to hear Shakil's thoughts, and I know he's got to get ready to bounce off shortly, and he may have another question for you before he bounces off.
No. Well, the first question was about business sense. As you know, I do spend a lot of time running around Beverly Hills and talking to various people, and I have a few things that I'm trying to do at the moment. Obviously, COVID's got in the way. I can say that I have met people that I think Marianne would know, like Stevie Wonder and a few other people like that. And what I've generally found is that they sort of fall into one of two categories. Either they have absolutely no idea what's happening with their money, or they've got business managers and they kind of know, like they have taught themselves a few things, but they're so focused on the next song they're going to do or the next show that they're going to do that they're not as focused on the money, and they tend to rely too much on their advisors and not pay as much attention as you would like somebody to pay. And that's why you see a lot of very famous people that earn mega amounts of money end up going broke. It's oftentimes because they're relying on other people and they just want to focus on that thing that they love. But the other thing, Marianne, you talked about sort of when you got to 50. And obviously, you used to be this gorgeous girl in her 20s that everybody's, loving so much. I think this is one of the problems that you see with a lot of child actors, especially coming out of Disney, is that they get to that sort of 19, 20, 21, and they don't want to be that cutesy little kid anymore. But then they sort of end up going too far the other way to try and prove that they're an adult. And oftentimes they don't have much of a career after that. So I think that it's a thing that the Meryl Streep's done this pretty well, and a few others have done this pretty well. It's about, you as a person growing. And as you said, you put your stamp on each character, and there's a bit of your own personality in each character that you play. And so people need to grow with you, and your fan base and your audience needs to grow with you across different movies, across different TV appearances as you get older, rather than having to completely sort of disavow who you were previously and reinvent yourself again. I think that it's look, I've changed over the years, and I think that the people that can do that tend to have a bit more longevity than those that sort of pigeonhole themselves into a particular type of character and allow themselves to be typecast that way.
Well, it's about authenticity. I think people buy authenticity. If you are true to who you are, as opposed to trying to play something, like going from one end of the spectrum to the other. I mean, I played drama. I played O.J. Simpson's wife, and I played his mother in the White Ford Bronco. Very different characters. But do I know what it's like to be poor? Do I know what it's like to be? Yeah, I do. There are certain things that I can draw on from my basket of character traits and bring to the table. But I think in terms of back to, authenticity, um, as an older person, uh, I'm not trying to look younger than I am. People say, "Oh, yeah, I don't believe you're 73, but you don't look 73. You don't act 73." I'm not trying to look 50. I'm not trying to look younger. I'm just trying to look damn good for 73 because that's who I am. And I don't deny my age. That's why I say my moniker on Instagram is aging shamelessly, because I think women need to tell their age. We need to be upfront. We need to bring, aging, getting older out of the closet and acknowledge it for what it is. I mean, do I put on moisturizer? Yep, I put on moisturizer every day. Um, but am I gonna get, like, no, I'm not gonna do anything, made, because then, you know, when you start messing with your face, it doesn't work right. Now, for people who want to do that and they do it judiciously, have at it. Do whatever makes you feel good. But when you do too much and it takes away your character, everything that your life experience that shows up on your face, then I think you do yourself a disservice, especially as an actor, because you can't tell certain kinds of stories because you are no longer authentic.
Speaking of authentic, and well, actually, a couple of things.
I'm just adding her to my Instagram so I can see what's happening.
Okay. Added to the Instagram. Cool. Speaking of authentic, because there was a couple things that, well, one on your page that you brought up, and that was the reclaiming of words. And I know that you talked about how certain people that are, for lack of a better term, heavy set, have reclaimed the word fat. You talked about how the LGBTI community has reclaimed the word queer, and it seems to me that you want folks that are over the age of 50 or 55 or 60 to reclaim the word old. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this reclaiming of words.
Well, I don't think 55 or 60. I don't think that old applies to them. I'm 73. I'm old.
Okay.
I'm old. I don't have a problem with it. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of midlife conversation on Clubhouse, and uh, and I was asked to join a midlife group, and I realized that when I come into those rooms and talking about midlife, the perspective I give is from as an elder, but midlife, I have matriculated through my midlife. I am firmly ensconced in my elderhood now, and I am embracing that.
That makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely understand embracing it. The other thing that I was going to bring up, which you talked about roles, and it was a conversation a few years ago where people were playing roles outside of their ethnicity, and that was a whole conversation in Hollywood. So I was wondering your thoughts about people that are like playing Asian characters that might not be of Asian background, or playing an African American character that might not be African American. But that was a whole conversation. I remember there were even a couple of sitcoms and movies that dealt with that. But I was just wondering your thoughts about this kind of non-traditional roles.
Uh, I think I think each ethnicity should get first dibs at playing their own ethnicity. I mean, there's like, Mickey Rooney used to play Asian characters, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and it's like, and it was played for a joke, more or less, more than less. Um, I don't think we can apply the old rules. I mean, we have to look at them. What happened back in the day, that happened then. When Adela Reese used to say, when you know better, you do better. We don't do that anymore. We're doing better now, or we need to do better now. And whatever happened in the past, acknowledge it and say, yeah, it was wrong, but we didn't. I heard Rita Moreno yesterday on 60 Minutes, and she was talking about the fact that her agent raped her.
Mm.
But she had to support her family and she wanted to be in the business. So she allowed him to continue to be her agent. Um, there was a lot of, and she talks about the fact that the casting couch existed, and there's a lot of stuff, that went on back in the day, and has continued and is probably even going on up to this day. But there were things that I know I'm jumping around here. Stop and think about some of the movies of the 50s that were popular. The Apartment. It's like there were a lot of stories about men who had a wife, and then the girlfriend that he was always trying to hide from his wife. And somehow or other, that was considered a romantic comedy. You couldn't have that as a storyline today. That would not play. It's not funny. But back then we thought it was a joke. Oh, the wife is coming. What are we going to do? We got to put her in the closet. I mean, that is, it's like we hopefully are evolving.
I don't think that's necessary that we should look back and say it was wrong. I think that it was obviously sexual abuse at the hands of powerful agents and things like that, of course, is wrong. But, storylines or people playing different characters and making fun of them, I don't think that that's necessarily wrong. It's just what the era was, and people, trying to sort of grasp what's around them at the time and talking about social dynamics of what's happening at that time. But on that note,
I think it's wrong. It would be wrong to do it today. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's like you can't do it now. You can't get away with that now.
I don't think. No, absolutely, and it might be wrong to do it now, but I don't think we should look back and think, dimly or feel, poorly about what happened in the past. On that note, it was lovely to be here today.
I disagree. I think you can look back at the past and say, because if you don't look at the past and acknowledge it for what it was, you can't learn from it. And I think we can look back and say, what the hell were we thinking? We're not going to think that way anymore. Okay, I'm done.
Sure, but we all get older and have, more life experience, and what seems fun at the time. I'm sure that the cocaine and marijuana that was enjoyed by those that lived through the 60s is something that they look dimly on now. But young people today are probably wanting to do the same thing, even though it might be a poor decision. It was lovely to be here. Thank you for having me on. I do have to go. I'm afraid I've got another meeting.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure being there, Shaquille. Definitely appreciate it. You had mentioned earlier about Della Reese, and I've got her book around here somewhere, and I thought that she was an amazing actress and everything. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about what Della Reese was like and her as an individual. Like I said, I've got her autobiography around here somewhere. I know she was a deeply spiritual person, and definitely I think that that's something that a lot of people in the particularly African American Hollywood are as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about Della Reese as an individual.
She was deeply spiritual, but it was I would say a practical spirituality, an everyday spirituality. She applied it. It wasn't just like holy, holy, holy. She applied it, to today. And she was, I guess, sort of new age in that way. And she could be, she could be salty. She could, she could cuss up a storm. That did not make her any less spiritual or any less a woman of God. It made her human. Okay. And, she could combine them in a way that was hilarious. I remember her saying, we were talking about what you can attract into your life, or how you have to be firm in your own convictions. Mm-hmm. And she said once, somebody could be the meanest mofo in the world, but if you don't have that within you, they will take that ish to somebody else and leave you alone. Okay. Yeah. So did I explain that well enough?
You explained that well enough, okay. Definitely. How important is faith and or spirituality in your own life? Because like I said, I know that I've had different guests of different backgrounds. Some that might consider themselves more spiritual, some that might consider themselves more religious. But I think that they all find that faith to be a very important issue. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are in terms of spirituality in your own existence.
Well, I think religion can be a distraction from spirituality.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Some people get caught up in religion and they get caught up in the dogma of the religion, and as opposed to the true meaning and teachings of the religion. I see people walking around claiming to be Christians, and I want to say, do you really think that's what Jesus would do? Really? Really? And some people look at religion like, like a fraternity, like God's going to take care of me and not you. We are all God's children. God doesn't think any more of you than he does of me or your neighbor. God loves us all. And I think that it's important for us to get back to that. And anyone who uses, and some people use religion as a hammer to beat people up with. No, 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 no. That's not what Jesus would do, or Allah, or Buddha. I believe that religions are all paths to the one truth. I believe that there is, you can call it God, divine mind, universal consciousness, whatever you want to call it. But I do believe that if you look at religion and science, and they are all coming towards the same truth. I don't know if science will ever figure out exactly what God is, but I know there is one. You can call it by whatever name you want.
I agree. Definitely, I agree with you on that. How do you deal with, because you mentioned it a couple of times, even with the whole conversation around age, but on this show and on a couple of my other shows, we talked about that whole self-doubt and how sometimes we can allow other people, whether it's either our external circles, and we can do it whether we're 70 or 80, or we can do it whether we're 15 or 20. But how, as an individual, do you get past either your own self-doubt or those nagging voices from without, the voices of people that are in your circle, whatever that circle may be?
I've had therapy. I've had therapy, but I trained as a therapist, so that I could understand the inner workings of not only my mind, but other people's. Training as a hypnotherapist made me a much better person, in understanding myself, and also in recognizing the fact that nobody can hurt my feelings. You can, we get sensitive. How do if somebody has an issue with me for whatever reason, first of all, I'm going to be accountable for, well, did I do something? What is my part in this? So my first thing is to take personal responsibility. And then if it just looks like they've got something going on with them, I just let it go, because it doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm clear about my boundaries. I'm not going to debate and say, well, blah, blah, blah. Well, you blah, blah. I'm not going to go there. Because I don't want to engage in, some people like to engage in arguments just so they can beat up on somebody.
Right.
And I go Zen. I distance myself from that. Now, if you want to have a reasonable conversation about, well, I think this way and I think that way, or when you did this, that bothered me. Sometimes people do things and they don't even know that they've done something. Like if somebody says, you stepped on my foot, or you took my blah, blah. I'm sorry. I didn't know I did that. We got into a lot of trouble there was a movie, Love Story. And there was a saying, love means never having to say you're sorry. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
That's a bunch of crap. Love means saying you're sorry all the time and really meaning it.
Well, you mentioned that. Sometimes I wonder about Hollywood and the Hollywood image, because I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, because I'm still, like I said, I've hit the big 6 next year, and I'm still in that single space and everything. And I do know that many years ago, my mom had told me, because she was trying to find out whether I had found true love. So she was describing what I would call that Hollywood love. Like, have you heard the bells, whistles? Have you heard the harp, the horns, and all of that kind of stuff? And I'm going like, wait a minute, do people really hear that, and do you know when you actually had that feeling? Because I do sometimes think that we get too caught up in kind of that Hollywood image, which may not be that real variation of what love is. Like I said, I think I knew what she was going for, because she was trying to figure out whether the heartstrings had been moved, but she was painting it in this kind of like, um, Hollywood stereotype.
So what is your question?
Does that really exist? That true love that you hear the bells and the
What?
whistles, or whatever you want to call them, or is it that we're so caught up in that Hollywood kind of variation that it's kind of what people put out there as what we should be looking for, and it might not be realistic?
I don't know. What is realistic? It might hold true for everybody's love experience is different.
Right,
Some people, there are people like, that suddenly there are people who on the first date, they know that that's the person they want to marry.
right,
There's some people they kind of grow into it. There's some people who grow together and then they grow apart. There is not one size fits all. I think if you want to be in a relationship, it's about, this is where my spirituality comes in. It's about being sure that you want to be in one,
right.
and then being open to what shows up,
That makes sense.
because sometimes they say, be careful what you ask for. Because I was married twice. I was married for most of my, with two different men for most of my adult life, into my 50s. And so I have been single, although I've had relationships, usually long-term, serially monogamous relationships, over the last 20 years. And I'm not sure that I would want to get married again,
Okay.
because when you're with a partner, there are advantages. There are things that you like about being with a partner. There's also things you got to work with. As a single person, there are things that you got to work with, but there are also advantages. I say, be where you're at and be happy with that. As a single person, I'm going to enjoy everything I enjoy about being single. So I'm not going to bemoan the fact that, oh, I'm not with somebody right now, or blah 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 blah. And it's like, oh, thank God, that means I can eat peanut butter and crackers in bed and nobody's going to kick me out of it. I don't really eat peanut butter and crackers in bed. That's a metaphor. I eat cheese and crackers. But I think, if you haven't found your person to this day, that's because you weren't looking. You didn't, if you make it a priority that I want this, you will find it. If
Right.
you haven't found it, then that means you're happy where you are. And if it shows up, it shows up.
I agree with you on that and everything, and I do agree that a lot of times people don't understand the benefits of serial monogamy as well, because definitely that is something that can be a
Or
wonderful thing.
being alone.
Yeah, or even being alone, because being alone can be a truly wonderful thing depending on what the situation that you are going for. But I definitely agree that being alone can be a truly beneficial thing in our life. But I don't know that we know enough about it. How have you mentioned Clubhouse? How have you enjoyed social media? Because, like I said, I know we met, even though a mutual friend had told me about you, and of course, I had met you a couple of times during the National Black Theater Festival. And actually, we have a couple of mutual friends, ironically, both with C's in their name, because I was thinking about both Carl and Calvin Anderson. But definitely, that being said, how has Clubhouse really benefited you, and have you enjoyed it, and have you found it? Because I sometimes hear people that are of a certain, I would say, age range that don't necessarily understand all the nuances of social media. Sometimes they want to understand the nuances. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they dive head first in. I know I've dived head first in. It definitely looks like you dived head first in. So I think different people have different missions with social media. But I was just wondering, what has your own relationship been with social media, and how much do you enjoy it or not enjoy it?
I would say that it showed up, well, Clubhouse. I'm on Instagram. I'd say Instagram is probably the platform that I'm on more than any of the others. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I tried TikTok, but there's only so many hours in the day, so there's only so much time that you can devote to that. Early on, I was on Clubhouse a lot when I first came on because I was curious about it. I wanted to hear what people had to say. I basically stay in two groups: the women over 50 group, the pro positive aging group, and then the new Hollywood group. As a matter of fact, today I wore my artistic standard hoodie so I can because Gino Brooks heard me in one of the rooms giving my pitch about women and ageism in Hollywood, and that if you didn't include a nuanced, layered, older female character in your scripts, you were leaving money on the table. He heard me, and 6 months he said, "I'm going to look out for you." 6 months later, he hired me for a movie, and I flew to LA to do it. It's called Gumbo. It's going to be coming out sometime in the 2022 on AMC's All Black network. And it's part of a Bear the Torch. He has a mentoring program, so with first time writer directors. And so it worked out well for me. I think, like anything else, there's scams, there's con artists, there's crazy people, but there's also people who are serious about community. A lot of artists on there who are doing, good stuff. So I think, what did they say? Wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
Whatever you put into something, you're going to get out of it. I don't spend as much time on Clubhouse now as I used to, because I'm involved in more of my own creative activities. But there are about maybe a dozen or so relationships that I formed that are really, really strong. And I keep in touch with them on Instagram. And a lot of them I got a chance to see in LA when I went out there to do the movie, the short film. Yeah. So I think you have to know why you're doing it. For me, social media is about staying in touch with, like, there's a lot of Edge of Night fans that I stay in touch with mostly on Facebook, because there's a lot of Facebook groups, soap opera Facebook groups. So I stay in touch with, my fans there, because soap opera fans are really loyal, and they care about what's going on. So I do engage with them and on Instagram, but I don't have a big following. I have like maybe a couple thousand, maybe about 3,000 on Facebook, and maybe about a couple thousand on Instagram. But I do engage with them. But I kind of feel like if you're one of my fans or friends, then I have a relationship with you. I don't just have like these people who are following me who I don't know they are. I pretty much know everybody. I haven't met them all personally, but I kind of feel like I have, something going on with them.
You have a relationship with them. Legacy and the legacy that people have. Do you think that we're doing a good enough job of maintaining those legacies? Because you mentioned a couple of folks that have passed on, including, like I said, we talked about Della Reese. I can even go into the National Black Theater Festival and Garland Senior, and even here in Durham, Baba Chuck Davis and a number of others. But I was just wondering, do you feel that we as a society are doing a good enough job of maintaining their legacy and their history? Because that's one of the things I know I've talked to Calvin Anderson and others about, is that there's a fear that after folks have left, that we won't know enough about their great works and the things that they have done. I mean, how many people really know that Garland Sr. was one of the original Star Trek people in terms of like his roles and things of that nature?
I don't think, no, in terms of, I don't know. Can you hear the dogs are barking? I have two dogs. I'm going to have to go soon because I'm going to have to let them out. Otherwise, I can only imagine what it's going to look like. And since you're not going to be coming over to my house to scoop up the poop, I'm going to have to do it.
Yeah, I understand.
But okay. But I think especially for Black people in this country,
Mhm.
whether it's in the arts or the sciences or anything, we need to build up our legacies
Yes.
and acknowledge where we came from and the shoulders that we stand on.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is not our fault because we didn't know. It wasn't told to us. There were some things that were kept from us. And I
Mhm.
think it's really important for us to keep digging and find those stories, like Hidden Figures. Oh my
Mhm.
God. Who do and there's more stories like that
Right.
that we don't know. And I think it's important for us to seek out and find the people whose shoulders we stand on.
No, I definitely agree, and I hear that dog in the background. And I am a
Yeah.
big animal lover, so I will let you go very shortly. But one of the things that I always ask all my guests, one, I hope that you'll come back because I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you will come back. And anytime that you've got things that you want to bring to the international broadcast media, even if it's shorts or things of that nature, or any of your routines, we would love to have it. And since I'm helping with the programming, I can say that with pretty much open arms because
Okay.
Nick and them have given me carte blanche to pretty much pick up whatever I want to pick up. So that's kind of a good thing and all of that. So that being said, do know that you have another avenue here. But one of the things that we ask all of our guests in any words of encouragement that they could give to this global world that we live in, which is going through so much, and whether it's the pandemic, which I hope we're coming out of, and I definitely see Hollywood and Broadway coming back, but even they are having to do things in a new way, whether it's a hybrid way or whatever other kind of ways that they're doing things. But any words of encouragement that you can give and ways that folks can stay in touch with you if they're interested in staying with you, in touch with you through social media. So any words of positivity is what I'm really looking for.
Oh, okay. Yes, I will. It's something that I say that was told to me by my dad when I was a little girl. Um, my and I if you look at my TED talk online, you can get the whole 12 or 15 minute uh, talk, which has a lot of encouragement in it. But the thing about what my dad said to me at a young age was, "Don't let anybody else's no stop your yes."
Mm.
You talked about it earlier about whether people have negative comments or
Mhm.
is there anything that you take personally. Don't let anybody else's no stop your yes. I'm an actor. I hear no a lot. I hear no more often than I hear yes. But when I was doing Edge of Night, uh, Ernie Townsend, who played my law partner, said he came in one day and he said, I was looking at my appointment book from 1978, I think it was. He said, and in that year I had 87 auditions, but I only got 2 jobs. One was Edge of Night, and he was on that show for 6 years, and the other one was Death Trap, which he did on Broadway for 2 years.
Mm.
2 jobs out of 87, only 2 yeses, but those were 2 really big yeses.
Right.
So hold on until you get your yes. Or as Della would say, she said, I ain't going to turn you loose till I get my blessing.
Mm. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Definitely, I can see that being a very powerful statement and everything. Did Iona have any quotes that you also enjoyed? Because you did mention that friendship with Iona Morris, and I do remember her coming to the National Black Theater Festival. And the other person I used to love dearly was Mickey Grant, who I know we lost earlier this
Oh,
year.
Mickey she was just one of the sweetest people. I'm glad I got a chance to know her. And Iona, I was like, you know what? I would not. I don't want to speak for Iona. You need to have Iona on your show and have her speak for herself.
I will do that. I will reach out
Okay.
to Iona and have Iona on because I definitely want to get some more of my friends from the National Black Theater Festival on. But I agree. Mickey was almost like a play aunt, a play relative, and would definitely encourage me anytime that I saw her, and it was definitely devastating news when I learned that she had passed and everything. And unfortunately, it was one of those cases because of what was going on with the pandemic that we didn't actually find out here in North Carolina till I want to say it was maybe a week or two after the fact and
Wow.
everything.
Wow. And we lost my. Did you know Imani Douglas? Did you know Imani?
I knew that the name, didn't know them that well, but yeah.
Yeah, she passed this past year too, and it was a gut punch for a lot of us.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to bring her name into the conversation, little Imani Douglas.
Yes, definitely another one of those legacy people that we need
Yeah.
to honor as well. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Baba Chuck Davis, and of course, he's passed on, the great dancer, and of course, Phil Freelon, who was the architect behind the African American Museum, or one of the lead architects, as well as several of the buildings around here and around the country. And his son, Pierce, is actually working with Robbie and Reese and others on that children's album that got nominated for a Grammy. So they are continuing the legacy, as he's a hip hop artist. And of course, Robbie Kamala has been involved in a lot of things in music. And she was a past guest as well. As a matter of fact, I think she was a guest a couple of weeks ago, sharing a lot of her wisdom and knowledge and everything. So before you go get those dogs, what advice would you give to young people that think they want to go into the arts? So anybody that's thinking that they want to go into the arts as an actress, producer, or whatever they think they might want to do in the arts field, maybe even a musician, what advice would you give to those that want to step into this brave world of the creatives?
Okay. Before you even ask yourself what it is that you want to do, or maybe you ask yourself the question at the same time, you have to have a strong why.
Mhm.
You have to have a really strong why about why you want to do it. To say, I want to be a star, or I want to be an actor, that is not enough. You have to know why. Like at the very beginning of our conversation, I said, I consider myself to be a storyteller. I want to tell stories about people that maybe you don't know, or stories that will enlighten you about other people that maybe you are not familiar with. That is important. That is important. That's my why. I have a very strong why. Now that I'm an older woman, I have as a young actor, my why was very strong about being a Black actor and wanting to see Black people portrayed in a certain way. I have a very strong why now as an older woman, wanting to see women being portrayed in a certain way that is positive and uplifting and enriching and energizing. Um, and when you have a really strong why, you know what to say no to. Because if it doesn't feed my spirit, if it doesn't feed my soul, I can say no. But I'm hanging around and even writing my own material and doing my own thing that feeds my spirit and feeds my soul, so that I have something to feed others.
I definitely agree with you. And like I said, I hear that dog in the background, and I do love my pets and
Please.
everything. So I'm gonna let you go and put on a couple of ads of everything. I'm convinced, by the way, that you are not really 73. You're really 60. You need to stop telling folks that you're 73, because I'm convinced that you're really 60 and
No,
much
I'm
younger than you
73. I'm
are.
73.
And a very
I'm
lovely person.
73, but I just love myself.
And rightfully so. I've always loved your personality, love your spirit, and like I said, I definitely hope that you will make it a point to come back on in a near future episode as well, because I definitely love your spirit and would love to have you come back on whenever you are available. But definitely, I'll be seeing you in those clubhouse streets, as a friend of mine calls them, and everything. And definitely, hopefully, there'll be a National Black Theater Festival in the near future, even though I don't think there's one this year, unfortunately. But there was not one this year. But hopefully there'll be one in 2023, or maybe they'll do one in 2022. But I do hope to see you in person in the not too distant future as well. So glad to have you on as a guest, and look forward to seeing you both in person as well as, of course, in the whole social media landscape.
No, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure. And definitely, I will see you in those mean clubhouse streets for sure.
Sounds good. So I'm gonna put
Okay.
on some of the ads for some of the other shows we've got, including Chess Stars, which is a show that my friend Sasha does about chess. So I'm gonna let Miss Marianne go off and take care of those
Those
lovely
dogs.
customers.
Let me go let the dogs out. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Bye.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
A very delightful interview with Marianne Alden. Of course, my good friend Shaquille Latimer joined in the conversation as well. But we're going to wrap up things here. But we do have Mullins and Music and Memories coming your way very shortly. But we've still got a few more advertisements that we want folks to check out as well. And then we'll get ready to get on out of here. But don't forget, Mullins Music and Memories will be coming your way at 4 o'clock. But just check out about some other important organizations and businesses as well. So we're going to check out about our good friend Lotus, who is now part of the International Broadcast Media family, as we just recently aired an episode of hers on, I believe it was Saturday night at 9, and another one that was on one of the weekday days. So we're hoping to have her show on a regular basis, along with Lady Maya, who will be adding as well. Who knows? Maybe we'll even get some shows from Mary Ann as well. But right now, let's check out what Lotus's whole business is about.
It's time for you to start bossing in social media. For all your social media needs, you've come to the right place at the right time to get your website designed, landing page, social media platforms, and get the training you need to get in front of the people that's ready to buy your products and services. Let me train you with StreamYard, Zoom, Clubhouse, and much more. And let me help you get your virtual professionals, not assistants, because assistants can only assist you, but the virtual professionals can give you that professional flavor that you need to expand your reach and increase your revenue. Jump on in and get in where you fit in and start bossing today.
Are you looking for money-saving strategies for your business and personal finances? Are you tired of working hard every day with little or nothing to show for it? Contact Prosperity Financial Services LLC right now for your free financial consultation. Call now to reserve yours today. 804-349-8600. 804-349-8600.
Put the keys down, Kevin.
But I'm gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
I guess I have really been looking for love in this dating app. Yep, I'm definitely gonna call a ride home.
What's the coolest thing about your job?
Engineers take the very best of science and technology and solve problems.
Did you know all that stuff when you were my age?
All I knew is that I really liked math and I really liked science.